The weather will be very different in February, as we are expecting a lot more snowfall in the northern tier of the United States, in addition to Arctic blasts, while areas in the southern tier of the United States deal with the ramp up of severe weather, including tornadoes, in addition to much warmer conditions. So in today's forecast, we're going to break down exactly what you need to know about the weather that'll be impacting the United States over the next couple of weeks. We'll begin with what's happening across the country right now, and we do have a lot of moisture that is coming right out of the Pacific Ocean, and we are expecting a relatively large storm to impact the country over the next few days right before we go into February. Right now, a lot of moisture sitting across Oklahoma and Texas, and this is going to ramp up a lot of showers and thunderstorms as we go throughout the daytime hours today. And there will also be a chance for severe weather both today and tomorrow across the southern plains and then back into the deep south, and we'll talk more about that here in just a moment. Back up into the northeast, we've had snow moving across areas in New England today. We also saw that yesterday. The snow will continue here for the next really 24 hours or so before eventually it moves out. Overall, not really any significant accumulation is expected out of this, but many areas will pick up around 2 to even upwards of 4 inches of snowfall. And then back over on the west coast, things are drying out and they are quieting down once again. Not really expecting anything too big along the west coast for the next few days, but atmospheric rivers continue to crash into Canada and just to the north there of Washington. As we go into February, we are expecting the snowfall to increase in coverage, especially across the northern tier of the United States. And this is here is the European ensembles, which basically show you an average of the amount of snowfall that we could see over the next few weeks. We'll begin with what's happening between now through February 6th. Right now, the European ensembles have a higher confidence of there being snowfall accumulation, primarily back up in Canada and back into the northeast with much lower amounts of snowfall, anywhere from the Rocky Mountains back through the Midwest and the northern Ohio Valley. But look how that changes as we get closer to February 13th and 14th, right around the middle of the month. The confidence is increasing that we are going to have a lot more snowfall across the Ohio Valley, the Midwest, and even back into the Northeast, which is vastly different from what we've been seeing so far this January, where we've had several winter storms that have moved across areas like the Gulf Coast and even back into the Southern Plains and even back through the Ohio Valley. So definitely a different trend is setting here as we get closer to the early to middle portions of February. I also want to point out that even in the Pacific Northwest, we are expecting a lot more snowfall in areas like the Pacific Northwest in the Rocky Mountains. So if you're a skier, that's definitely some good news. Another really interesting thing will be the temperature trends, as we are expecting above average temperatures to begin the month of February. Notice how the entire lower 48 is mostly shaded in red, which would indicate above average temperatures anywhere from January 30th all the way through February 6th. A few areas that will not be dealing with that, though, will be areas like the Northeast and also back through the Pacific Northwest, where an Arctic air mass will be building in Western Canada. It is going to be very frigid up there. That Arctic air mass is likely to move into the northern plains in the Midwest as we eventually get closer to around February 10th or so. So definitely something to watch for here across areas in the northern plains, Midwest, and even back into the Ohio Valley. Right now, it looks like the strongest of that cold air will be right along the Rocky Mountains, and exactly how far south that sharp temperature gradient drops is really questionable at this point, as it still is around or just after a week from now, but it will be something to watch for as we are expecting more Arctic air. And then anywhere around the middle and end of the month, things become a lot more uncertain. But the general idea, I think, for February is that we will be dealing with above average temperatures on average. Again, this is not going to be the entire month, but overall, above average temperatures are likely along the Gulf Coast in the southeast. Below average temperatures are likely back over in the Pacific Northwest and also back into areas like the Ohio Valley and the Northeast. So we are able to forecast trends like snow and as well as temperatures well out in advance, upwards of 2 to 3 weeks sometimes in advance. But we're going to talk more about what's happening in the short term over the next 7 to 10 days. And right now, we actually have a large storm that is forming here back over in the southwest, in addition to moisture that is accompanying this particular low pressure system. And as we go into tonight and as well as into tomorrow, we are expecting lots of rainfall anywhere from the southern plains all the way back into areas like the Ohio Valley and the Northeast, in addition to even a little bit of snowfall. And there will also be some severe weather associated with this. Eventually, as we go into Friday into Saturday, the jet stream will eventually become a lot more zonal, which means that things will be quieter, I think, for most of the country as we go into the weekend. So if you have any weekend plans, definitely looking good for that. And eventually, as we go into early next week, we are likely going to be seeing some really strong ridging that's going to be taking place across the Gulf Coast, and also zonal flow in the jet stream, which really limits the amount of extreme weather events that we see. And we aren't probably going to be dealing with very many large storms, I think, over the next week or so, aside from the one that's happening today and as well as tomorrow. And then eventually, as we go into Thursday and into Friday, notice how the jet stream still remains very zonal, but I think eventually this will crack as we go closer to the middle of the month. And what I mean by that is I think we're going to start to see more turbulence in the jet stream, which means a lot more curvature. And I honestly think we are going to be talking about a lot more winter storms and also a lot more cold and even Arctic blasts by around the middle and end of February. So I think the first week or two may start off a little quiet, but I think it's going to really start to ramp up by the middle and end of the month. And the temperature trends are going to be very interesting over the next couple of weeks. We'll be dealing with above average temperatures for the next few days, all the way into the first 3 or 4 days of February, especially east of the Rocky Mountains through areas like Texas. Many areas down in the southern plains will be as high as the low to mid 70s as we go into early next week, which is unprecedented even for this time of the year. And then also back through the northern plains and back into the Pacific Northwest, we are expecting Arctic air to be building. This will really be impacting areas mainly in the Pacific Northwest and the northern plains, but it should eventually unleash into much of the United States as we go into the middle of next week. Exactly where and how intense this is across areas like the central and southern plains, the Midwest, the Ohio Valley, and the Northeast remains very uncertain, but one thing looks pretty likely here is that we're going to continue to deal with above average temperatures along the Gulf Coast of the United States even into the end of next week, and then beyond that things become a lot more uncertain. But right now the GFS model, at least good news for right now, is not showing any major Arctic blasts, not anything that's huge or enormous like what we saw in January, but again, I think that's going to be coming sometime around the middle or end of February. It's really only a matter of time. And over the next few days, we are expecting a large storm to form in the southern plains. This is what it'll look like by tomorrow morning. Lots of rain falling across the central and southern plains. This could lead to some localized flooding, especially in eastern Oklahoma and across Arkansas. Eventually into Thursday night into early Friday morning, this storm continues to move northeast. Notice how there's really no snow or even freezing rain with this. Reason why is because all this warm air is coming right out of the Gulf of Mexico, and there's no Arctic air really coming out of Canada right now because this particular storm system has come from areas in the southwest, which is actually where warmer weather resides right now. So this is not overall going to be much of a winter storm as we go into Friday or Saturday, but probably at least going to see snow in the northeast. The chances of snow anywhere in the Midwest or the Ohio Valley continue to decrease as we go into Friday and Saturday. Eventually into Sunday into Monday, another shot of snow is likely across the Great Lakes region in the northeast. Exactly how much snow falls is still uncertain, but make sure you're subscribed to the channel as we'll keep you posted with the latest. And eventually into Monday into Tuesday, things look a little bit quieter, but I do think we're at least going to have a few smaller scale storms that impact the United States, perhaps with some wintry precipitation, maybe with some severe weather. Again, exactly what happens is still uncertain as this is still well over a week from now. Now, we are expecting a ton of rain over the next few days from this large storm system. All that red and orange is going to be where we have the bulk of this precipitation. Around 1 to 3 inches of rain is in the forecast from around North Texas, which is the Dallas-Fort Worth area, across much of Arkansas and even into Kentucky and as well as into Tennessee. And if you go a little bit more localized here, notice how high the rainfall accumulation numbers could get. We could have some areas in Arkansas as high as 4 to even upwards of 6 inches of rain in some isolated locations. So be mindful, there will be a chance for some localized flooding, perhaps even some more significant flooding in low-lying areas. And guess what? There is a risk for severe weather both tonight and as well as tomorrow. We're not really expecting much of a risk tonight. I think it'll be mostly just a line of storms that forms producing damaging winds, hail, and maybe a brief tornado. I think the risk overall for tornadoes though today is relatively low. We won't have much wind shear out there. As we go into tomorrow, the tornado threat could be a little bit more elevated, but I'm not really confident that we're going to be seeing that many tornadoes. I think maybe a couple or a few tornadoes will be possible in eastern Texas and including areas around the Houston area throughout the late morning into the early afternoon hours. That tornado threat will continue to shift towards areas like Louisiana, southern Arkansas, and southeast Texas around 2 to 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and then eventually as we get closer to sunset, that tornado risk is much lower back over in eastern Louisiana and western Mississippi, where this will be predominantly just some gusty winds and maybe a few rumbles of thunder. So here's the timing for the rest of the day today into tomorrow. Overall showers and storms will be out there really all day today, but a lot of this will just be some downpours and elevated thunderstorms. So not a whole lot of severe weather is expected throughout the daytime today, but there could be a few storms after sunset tonight that get a little bit more organized around areas like Abilene back into Dallas and Fort Worth that could produce some isolated damaging winds and hail. I really truly think this tornado risk today is very low, but have a tornado action plan just in case and have multiple ways to receive alerts. And then eventually into the overnight hours into early tomorrow morning, this will be mostly just a line of thunderstorms, not any really discrete activity out there. So it'll be mostly gusty winds. Again, maybe an isolated damaging wind event during the morning. Heavy rain spreads into Arkansas and eastern Oklahoma. Eventually by lunchtime, this line continues to push east. It really doesn't look that impressive to me right now. Again, I think this will be mostly just some damaging winds. We could get an isolated discrete cell or two that come off of the Gulf and eventually move into Louisiana during the early to mid-afternoon hours. And if that happens, we may have an isolated tornado or two. But at this time, it does not look like something will be going live for. But in case there are any changes to the forecast, make sure you're subscribed to the channel and click the bell icon down below so you're notified if we go live tomorrow. I think it's a very low chance, though, at this time. And also, thank you guys so much for watching today's forecast. It is a rare forecast that was made on my birthday, so I appreciate you guys watching. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you guys all again in the next video.